Well, shall we have aid, please?
Please state your full name,
Mr. Adrian Paul Charles Goodyear.
and if you could repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely,
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
AIDS, you have severe haemophilia A, and that was diagnosed when you were a baby.
Yes, at 6 months.
And your mother's own ill health meant that she couldn't care for you, so you were fostered at quite a young age.
Yes,
By the Goodyear family, and ultimately adopted by them when you were about 7.
yes,
And for this first part of your life, you were under the care of St Mary's Hospital, Portsmouth, until you went to Trelaw School.
that's true, yes.
Now, you've mentioned in your statement various conversations and actions reported to you by your dad concerning a doctor who you've identified as Dr. Peter Green.
Yes,
And I think you know that Dr. Green's provided us with a statement which says he didn't become a haematologist, a consultant haematologist at St Mary's until 1981, after your dad died.
that's so.
He was there for a couple of years early in the 70s as an SHO.
Yes.
So he thinks whoever you're referring to can't have been him.
I think that my dad may have got that from my first special medical card, because I had Peter Green's name, or Dr. P. Green, was on my medical card from birth. So my dad probably just assumed that was always the name of the person that he was dealing with at Portsmouth. So Dr. Green, the name just stayed throughout my childhood.
So your statement talks about, and I'm going to ask you a little about some of those conversations.
Yes.
But we're now not sure the name of the doctor who had those conversations with your dad, but it looks like it wasn't Dr. Peter Green.
No.
Now, you were infected with hepatitis B, and in 1978, at the age of 7, you became aware of an outbreak of that infection. Can you remember anything about that?
Clearly, it's a memory that's so locked in that it's crystal clear today. My dad unusually had a quieter day at work, so Mum couldn't drive, so he took me into the hospital for a right ankle bleed. I went up to the ward as normal, C1 ward at St Mary's, and Dad dropped me off. He went to work about 9:30. The doctor, my factor, came upstairs from the path lab as usual, and the minute that injection went into my arm, into this hand, I blistered. My right arm blistered within minutes, and the pain is pain as a child that I've never experienced. I screamed ward down, and it took them around 20 minutes to give that factor 8 injection. So that's the memory, and the nurse was trying to keep me calm, and the doctor said, "Don't worry, it'll be over in a minute," and trying to keep me calm, being very supportive while it was being administered. The issue came later. I got sick in the afternoon. I started throwing up. I obviously had quite a severe reaction to that first factor 8 concentrate injection, which was Lister product. By the evening, Dad came back around 6:30, 7 o'clock. I'd already started to turn yellow. My eyes had gone yellow. My skin had a shade to it. Bernard, my dad, took one look at me and called the doctor, who was still there on the ward, and said, why does Adrian look like that? All this is crystal clear, because my dad wasn't that kind of person. He's very calm. But why does he look like that? Can I have a chat, please? Can we sit down and have a talk about what's happened with my son? Then the doctor of the day said, don't worry, Bernard. It's all part of the process. This will all clear up. This will right itself, really, and the words to that effect. Not to worry. Keep calm. Dad believed that for a short time. the issue remains now that the conversation that took place before Dad left me that night, the doctor decided to tell my dad, after reassuring him that it was all part of the process and for him not to worry, do you know, Bernard, sometimes I feel haemophilia is a terrible condition. Sometimes I feel it's best to let these dads go. Now, my dad, with me being newly adopted, was super protective of me and my haemophilia. And that resonated very negatively with him, obviously. So that kind of wraps that first day up. So that's...
And you've also recorded in your statement, in terms of the conversation which your dad had with whoever that doctor was, the doctor told your dad that factor 8 was revolutionary, so not to worry.
Not to worry.
And that what was happening to you was quite normal, would eventually pass and wouldn't come back.
There you are.
And you've also described how you recall being given an extra shot of factor 8 in the middle of the night. You weren't bleeding at the time, and you've never understood why you were given that extra shot.
That's right. I was due home. Obviously, usually we're a week in hospital back in those days for a frozen bleed. I was due home on the Wednesday afterwards. That stuck, and it's a little bit of a movie scene, if you like. The hospital light was over me. A young doctor called, remember his badge, came in, said, "We're just going to give you one more shot. Just one more go before you send you home with." And I remember sort of protest, but I don't normally have an injection now or anything now. I'm going home tomorrow. And so yeah, that's again, it's crystal clear.
And you had 2 further occasions in which you contracted hepatitis B, at the age of 9 and at the age of 11.
Yeah.
And on both those occasions, you ended up in hospital and being cared for in isolation for a week.
That's
or 2
right, yeah.
time.
And the 1981 one was the worst. I was very, very sick for 2 weeks. And I was projectile vomiting. It was very poorly lad at that point. I thought I would die.
And around the age of 9, you began to have home treatment of factor 8.
Yes.
Still under the care here of St Mary's Hospital,
That's right.
Portsmouth. Your parents found it quite difficult to administer, and you started the process then of learning to do it yourself.
Dad couldn't go near it. Mum learned well. She learned how to do the needles, but she kept missing. So I sort of had a go and did a few shots, but I was a misser too. It wasn't really till later on that I got to Trelawn's that I learned how to administer.
Now, in terms of the information given to your parents by St Mary's Hospital, Portsmouth, were they given any advice or information or warnings about any risks of infection associated with the use of the factor 8?
Absolutely not.
And if they had been, what do you think your dad's reaction would have been to you having the treatment?
He would have, because with him being a Navy man and quite high up in the Navy in his time, he would have gone in there and sat down and had a conversation in a mature and measured manner about my future treatment protocols and what that was going to entail. He's very logical, very methodical. So that's guessing, but knowing him, that's how he would have approached it.
And you've said in your statement, again, knowing what he was like, you don't think he would have wanted to take any risks on your behalf of you having such treatment if there was a risk of serious infection?
Never. He was a cryo man. He wanted cryo back. When I was 9, I recollected him telling me that. Let's get in cryo back, yeah.
Now, your parents decided to send you to Lord Mayor Trelaw's school in Hampshire.
Yeah.
And you've explained in your statement there were a number of factors. You were being bullied at primary school because of your haemophilia.
Yep, first day that I arrived at my middle school, primary school, the headmasters decided to put Mr. T, as he used to call him, up in front of the 100, 200 students. This young lad, Adrian, has haemophilia. Don't hit him. You can imagine how the next 4 years of that played out. Or what happens if I lump you? So I lumped a few back, but I ended up with the bleeding, they didn't. So that didn't work out, and I got my arm broken when I was 9, quite badly in 3 places. After somebody hit me with an iron bar, so it's time to go from that school. It wasn't working.
So it was the bullying at the school. You'd also, because of your haemophilia and the need for treatment, you'd missed quite a lot of school.
Yes.
And also your parents weren't particularly happy with the with the quality of care
Dad-
being
Dad
provided
more
at
than
St
Mum.
Mary's Hospital. So the decision was taken that you'd go to Lord Mayor's Trelaw School, and your dad took you to the open day there in March of 1980,
In March, yeah.
but he died the following month.
He died a month later.
You started at Trelaw's in September of 1980.
Yes.
What was your impression, your first impressions of the school?
To use a very simplistic term, it was incredible. I mean, most 10-year-olds don't really have this kind of imagination. But I remember standing in front of the Jacobean mansion called Gaston House thinking, wow, Portsmouth versus this place. It was a real wow moment. I thought, oh, this is going to be good. And I was a bit homesick the first year, but I loved it from the minute I put my head down on the pillow in the first dormitory with 5 other lads, three of which were haemophiliacs in the 5-bed dorm. I just thought, I don't care what this place, let's do this.
And you've described in your
Loved
statement beautiful rolling countryside, far-reaching views. There was the Jacobean mansion and a medieval church.
Yeah.
And you said to you it seemed like a wonderful place as a 10-year-old child
Yeah.
to be. There were lots of different mixes of pupils,
Incredible.
varying degrees of health and disability.
Well, with my first school, my very, very first school was a school called Futcher School in Drayton. So and Mum used to run a minibus for disabled kids with Down syndrome. So I was already, and hospitals, so I was very much in that mix anyway. So it's, to me, just it was just a normal situation, so yeah.
And in terms of the bond and relationships that developed with other pupils at Trelaw's in those early years, what was that like?
Instant. Especially, do you mean in haemophilia terms or generally?
However you remember it.
Across the board, haemophiliacs seemed to rule the roost because we mostly could walk, mostly. So we were already in that hierarchy of school life. But I made friends really quickly. We all did, really. I don't think there were too many lonely people there. And I used to look round at the ones that were a bit homesick and give them a cuddle. And then, so that bond was very quick. Being 10, you're children. So you do look out for each other just naturally without knowing it.
And
Surviving, really.
you've described in your statement there was a junior school and a senior school.
Yes.
With 2 separate facilities, but on the same site. Is that right?
There were 3 miles apart, yeah. One was in Foyle, Hampshire, which was the lower school for younger students below 15 on average. And then the upper school in my day was 16 plus, 15, 16 plus.
And there was the facilities at the school in terms of the care and treatment of children like you who had haemophilia. You've described in your statement there was a lab, a transfusion room. They became almost like home, is the way you.
Well, that became the lab and the transfusion came after the extension of the Trelaw Centre. Prior to that, it was a transfusion room and a tiny office, which everyone and the nurses huddled into. And then in Christmas 1982, it had quite an extensive extension. I mean, the rooms weren't big, but it cost some money. And there was a mini lab and there was a fridge room, and we were encouraged to go into the fridge room and get our Factor 8 to make it tangible for us to learn how to administer it. So, yeah.
And do you know how that extension work, which you've described in your statement in some detail, do you know how that was funded?
No. And this is a question that we'd like to look into, really, because it wasn't there one before Christmas. We came back at Christmas, and it was incredible. It was a new dawn. I didn't think that at the time, but looking in hindsight now, it was a new dawn in treatment.
And you've raised the concern in your statement that development and extension of the school facilities and site may have been funded through pharmaceutical companies.
I can't see where the money... Speculatively, yes.
Some of you were called by one of the nurses her golden boys. Why
Yes.
was that?
Because one of my first... Actually, this is my closing statement, so I'll say it now. One of the nurses, there was a picture of... one of my first memories of the transfusion room, there was a picture of Queen Victoria and Leopold. And I knew who that was. And I said to the nurse, Annie, I said, why is there a picture of Queen Victoria and Leopold pinned to the board? He said, because you boys have got a raw disease, when haemophilia was called a disease back then. Have we? Leopold had haemophilia and said, and you are golden. You know, golden meant because it came from the old cryo and the old plasma that went in. She thought it looked golden. It was a way her lovingly supporting us little ones into making it okay, because she was a wonderful woman, a wonderful nurse, and she always made it okay. So we were her golden boys for many reasons, but that was one of them. We were royal, we were special in some way.
And you've also said in your statement the term golden boys also reflected the possibility, just in case, as you've put it in your statement, we went yellow.
Yeah.
And in terms of the medical staff on site, because you had a whole range of nursing staff, many of whom you remember very fondly.
Yeah.
And then the doctor who was in charge during your time there was Dr. Arenstam.
Yes.
And his number two, as it were, was Dr. Wasser.
Yes.
But there were other junior doctors as well during the time
There
that
was.
you
There
were
was
there.
a revolving door. Yeah. As
You,
usual.
you've produced to us a copy of a home training programme document that was provided to the pupils. We'll just have that on screen, please, Paul. It's 12420003. Thank you. And this is a document that was given to all the pupils with haemophilia by the school. Is that
Yes.
right? And it was to provide you with some information and practical guidance. If we just go to page 9, please, Paul. Just look at the bottom right hand. That's it. We can just have the bottom of the page. Thank you. So we can just see there, it refers to disposal of equipment. And point 3, it says, wrap up remainder of equipment neatly in disposable sheet and place in special bin marked hepatitis risk.
Yes.
What can you recall from your time there, your early years there, was known or understood about hepatitis?
It became the norm. So to start with that, it was the norm that we'd all go yellow. You just took the mick out of each other and you support each other in those periods. Milton, as in the bleach, the antiseptic, that was that was everywhere. So everything had to be clean with Milton. You know, sometimes I go home with a bottle of Milton in my treatment pack. So that was Milton cleared everything. So that was as much as my knowledge was. A bottle of Milton, use that, and then there'll be no problem. It was that simple. That was the only piece of advice at that age we were given. And the smell, because it was the smell of the Milton. It actually came more from a question, actually, not them telling us that.
Now, you've recounted in your witness statement something you were told later by a pupil at Trelaws from the 1970s, Charles, about a conference that Dr. Arenstam attended in 1980.
Yes.
So what can you recall Charles telling you about this?
I met Charles when I first turned up to Archer, and it's one of the very first things he told me. He said, do you know about the 1980 conference that Dr. Arenstam, haemophilia conference, that Dr. Arenstam attended? I went, no. And Charles proceeded to tell me that he went to a conference and he found there was a German company. Now, my German dialect is very poor, but it was Bearer something, and said, Dr. Arenstam went out there with two of the guys from that company and said, we can heat treat factor 8. We've got it. These guys have got it. They worked it out. The issue became a problem. It became a problem within that conference because the Americans laughed him out the room. So he really believed that factor 8 could be heat treated and we were going to be safe. So what Dr. Arenstam did, he only stayed for 2 days of that conference, returned to the Trelaw Centre. He said, I'm going to treat my patients. If you don't sort this out, we're going to have some problems.
And what you've put in your statement is that this was a conference. You've not been able to find anything out much about the conference itself or any documentary record of it. You understood from Charles it was in 1980 in South America, and in the course of it, Dr. Arenstam expressed his concerns about the need to heat treat the factor concentrate.
And he actually believed the process was so simple that the German guys had found it could be done within 3 months.
And then we'll obviously come on to the question of what products you were given.
Yeah.
And when. But one of your recollections that you've recounted in your statement is Dr. Arenstam introduced his own kind of heat treatment, not having heat-treated products available to him to purchase.
Yeah.
He did his own heat treatment at Chalours. What did he used to do?
Well, him and his colleague, Dr. Wassif, there was a mixing machine in the transfusion room after it made a heck of a noise. And they became, I would say, not obsessed, but overly, really thinking about this mixing machine and how warm the water was. And they would always try and maintain 28 degrees in that water and tell the nurses. I clearly remember Dr. Wassif coming in twice at least. Said, is it 28 degrees? And he would check the temperature. Yep, carry on. And there used to be, if you had a frozen over bleed, all you want is the factor to get on top of it. They would make you wait 20 minutes sometimes, and you knew it would mix in 15 or 10 in that mixer, but the extra 5 minutes used to take forever. You just wanted that factor to get rid of your frozen bleed. So they were quite, and equally, by that point, Chalours were providing all my home care, out of term, school term factor 8. I was given a thermometer to say you mustn't inject it, like Master Goodyear, you mustn't inject it below 28 degrees. So I believe, looking back on that, that's what happened. He was trying to do some kind of heat treatment.
And you've said in your statement you have a recollection of Dr. Arenstam or Dr. Wassef saying from time to time words to the effect, "Don't worry, boys, we're going to warm it up. There'll be no more yellow."
That's right. Again, because it's such a childlike way of putting it, so it resonated with us. Yeah.
Now, in the autumn of 1982, you put in your statement in September, but I understand you now believe it might have been later after the half term.
It was cold. It was October. It was a cold. Yeah, it was that kind of temperature.
50 boys were chosen by Dr. Arenstam for what you've described as an 8-month trial with American plasma from Speywood. Is that
yes,
right?
Yes, that's right.
What can you recall?
The one thing that we wanted not to walk away to see when we went for the archives was Dr. Arenstam and Wassif, any trouble to them or anything really, really wrong. We found that out last September that he selected 50 of us to receive an 8-month trial from this plasma from Speywood Labs, who it was flown from, as far as I can ascertain, it was flown from America or somewhere in Europe into Liverpool and distributed. I can recall a lot. When I got back from that half term, there was a different bottle on the table, very different, because children, well, I thought in imagery, children think in more images than they do, words in academy at that point in writing. So we knew all the colours, we knew all the logos of all the products, what they were, and so the nurse put this, again, I was just past my home treatment training, I'd achieved it. The nurse put the factor out in front of me for a bleed, only a mild bleed, I think it was. But I picked up the bottle and it was wrong. It was a beta bottle. It was a black and white label, and the reason why I picked up it being so wrong, it was double printed, so it was blurred. So I said to the nurse, I can't read this because we were learning how to do our bleed sheets and fill out our bleed sheets with our batch numbers as well at the time. I can't read. Can you read it? And she went, I'm supposed to mix that one. I said, oh, sorry. And she went to her bench. And I overheard it. She said back to me, I don't like this stuff. I don't like this stuff. Very nervous. And that's what I remember of that. It took, yeah. So, yeah.
And in contrast to the products you'd had previously there,
yeah,
which all came in, you've described bottles with some kind of logo, company name and name.
Yes.
These were different bottles, plain bottles with a white label and then this black printing on
That was all it was. And it seemed wrong. even because you get used to seeing things the way they are and what colours. Say the box of Co-8 would be a brownie colour, or green colour for BPL. You just knew the colours and the logo. Yeah.
You do you recall whether you had any particular reaction to this particular product that you were being given?
First one, on that day, I had a mild reaction, and the treatment then was Piriton, and you put your head forward, down, and just rest your head until the Piriton. So yeah, I had a mild reaction, and I had quite a few more reactions thereafter. It was I didn't really react to factor 8. I was one of the luckier ones in some ways, but that line I did. I had quite a lot of Piriton, well, a fair amount of Piriton was administered in that time.
And you would come out in rashes?
Yes.
Said.
Yeah.
And you believe, you don't know, but you believe that when you subsequently discovered that you had been infected with HIV, it was from these products? That was the line. I don't know if it was actually in that first 8 months trial or I was infected then, but it was definitely in those American products because I remember being very sick. And you've also said in your statement that you believe that every boy at Trelawn's on that trial became infected with HIV.
Yes, because if you do the numbers back in those days, there was 56 haemophiliacs, we now know it's 64 infected with HIV. But back in those initial days, it was 56. Dr. Arasam chose 50 of us for that trial, and then there was 6 more, so 56. And my point is, the nurse relayed back to us one day, there was one batch that infected you boys with HIV, one batch. She didn't mean one batch, she meant one line of product. And that in that window of time, that's when HIV came. So I do personally believe that those are the lines that infected us with HIV as children. Yeah.
Now, were you told anything about being put in any kind of trial of a product?
Not at all. We were so compliant as children, as professional patient children, that you wouldn't ask. You sometimes ask the odd question about a tablet, maybe. That would be a pain, but no.
Was your mum told anything, as far as you know?
No.
You have a recollection of the fridge in which Factor products were kept, and there were different products on different shelves in a kind of hierarchy.
Yes, there were.
What can you tell us about that?
I know that prior to it, I think it was a little bit more mixed mash in the 70s, but by 1980, that early 80s period, yes, there was Scottish at the top, in the left, a fridge on the left, and that was always said, the Scottish is the best. Dr. Watts, if you say, this is Scottish, this is the best. If we can get some more of this, right, sold it, really. You have to bear in mind how small we were, so we're just sponges. Second shelf down, there was only BPL products, and there was no American in that one fridge. There's overspill stocks in the second fridge, more English and different products, and then behind us there was this great big fridge that we know today, the big industrial fridges, and that was full of American Factor 8 and Factor 8.
And were you given Factor 8 solely in response to injury or trauma, or were you given it prophylactically?
Prophylactically. There was if I use the word copious, it might be an exaggeration, but there was plenty of Factor 8. Yeah, and I was worried. We were worried about hepatitis. Why? And being on prophylaxis, you don't want to be on prof because you're there 3 days a week, sometimes every day, and it gets in the way of your school life. You haven't got to bleed on prof, so forget it. We want to get on with our life at school. But there was a lot of prof, and there was no shortage of Factor at all.
You've recently obtained your records from UKHCTO,
Friday.
which show you receiving a significant quantity of Factor products, but you don't think that shows, as I understand it, anything like the true volume that you were given?
It genuinely doesn't, because all I saw after Spaywood, which I've now nicknamed that period, the Spaywood period, I never saw British again. It was all American after that. right, I mean, as far as I can remember, there may have been the odd dose of UK products, but it was American, 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 and no shortage of American.
If we just have back up on screen, please, Paul, that document we were looking at before, 12430002. And if we can go to page 12. Two pages further on, please. Oh, okay, don't worry, we don't seem to have the rest of the document. The training programme document that we looked at before, Aidan, which you supplied to the inquiry, it says at the end of it what products are available: cryoprecipitate, freeze-dried concentrates, e.g. Lister, Factor 8, Haemophil, Co-8. So those are some of the examples of what was being given
There you go.
as were available. Yeah. Now, you've already described to us the refurbishment over Christmas 1982, when you came back and you've said in your statement that the centre was refurbished, extended considerably, and it seemed to you at the beginning of the 1983 spring term that a new dawn in haemophilia treatments had been built. It was that great.
Yeah.
You've also referred in your statements to pharmaceutical companies providing gifts to the children. What can you recall about that?
This was a very short window of time, about 2 years, maybe 2.5. They would provide us, obviously, with the takeout kits if you go on holiday, Baxter bags, rucksacks and things like that, so on. So American product. That became a mild competition between us boys. And in the by the fridge room, there were boxes of products of watches. It's ironic it was watches given the circumstance, because, you know, how much time have we got? You look back on that now. It was watches, backpacks, stationery was a big one, with it being a school. I mean, this is a good point. I remember once looking down at my pencil case in about 1984, 3 or 4. Every single pen in there was an American pharmaceutical branded pen. And it was given out, I think it was seen innocently, given out as incentives to do your treatment well, come back to the Hemo Centre. But there was a couple of genuinely special gifts. One was this pyramid watch. It looked expensive, it was heavy, and there was a box of those. But the ultimate prize, if you like, in that time frame, was a chronograph watch, and there was and everybody wanted one of those. And myself and my dear friend Ray, my dorm mate, we were in competition for that watch. And actually, there was about a box of 9 of them, and I won, and Ray didn't, but basically I made sure that Ray got a watch. Interesting, what's not in my statement, after we found out about HIV, I took that watch apart, bit by bit by bit, and I couldn't put it back together again. That was something psychological going on there.
But the 2 years or so for which you think these products were these gifts were being made available at the school, can you recall roughly when that was? If you can't, don't worry.
Oh, I can. It was definitely post-extension.
Okay.
So around that time.
So 83, 84 perhaps?
For definite, yeah, not prior to that.
And you've put it this way in your statement, with the benefit of hindsight, you've said this: looking back now, it was like being groomed by the peddlers of death, but at the time we were happy with the setup as they were freebies.
There you are.
You've also in your statement, and sticking at the moment with 1983, you've recalled a moment in 1983 where you overheard Dr. Arenstam talking to 2 pharmaceutical reps.
Yes.
What can you recall about that?
The reason why this sticks in my head, because it was one of the first times we heard him swear, and being children hearing a doctor swear is unusual. It was like a scene from a film. Myself and my friend Simon were having a lunchtime clinic with you, and he had Dr. Aronson came out with his 2 reps, and the minute they left his office, he had one hand on one shoulder here, one of the reps and the other like this, and he gently walked them out the double doors, and said, "And don't come back here selling your shit to me again." And it was the big boss. Wow, we'd never heard him swear. So And he came over to Simon and I went, right, boys, who's next? Yeah.
You've also recalled in your statement a later conversation you had with Dr. Arenstam in 1991, because although you left, what year did you leave?
1989.
But you stayed being treated
Yes.
in that area?
Yes, and there was a polygen assistant. It was an outpatient clinic still. So I stayed in the area and stayed under their care until mid-Basingstoke until 1997.
And you had a conversation with Dr. Arenstam in around 1991 when you went for a treatment for an elbow bleed.
Yeah, I had a fresh bleed. I just thought, well, maybe I'm going to get a jab and see if there's a doctor still there. It was a bit late. So he was obviously working late. And it was only him there in the centre before lock-up. And I went, hello. And he said, oh, come on in. And I walked into a man that was staring at his desk. I can only say in that moment, it was very short, 15 minutes, he was a broken man. So that gets me. I was counselling him. Don't worry, you did your best. No, we messed up. A's didn't need to happen. The PHLS have let me down. I didn't really know who the PHLS were in the abbreviated form, and some other. He said they let me down. They set me up. I said, and I kept trying to comfort him, say, you've done your best. This is just an accident. You've done your best, because we believed then that was the scenario. I couldn't really comfort him, but he actually poured me a brandy as well. So we shared a brandy.
In your statement, you've put it this way, Dr. Arenstam swearing again, in fact, you've said he explained to you that PHLS had fucked him. He said he'd done all he could and that he'd done his best, but did not understand why they did not listen to him and implement heat-treated blood products when he suggested they do so. Is that right?
And A's didn't need to happen. Yes, that's right. That's correct.
Now, you have memories from this period in the first half of the 1980s at Trelaws of boys, your schoolmates, becoming unwell,
Yes,
developing jaundice.
regularly.
And you became aware at some stage of media reporting of killer blood. And there was a particular Daily Mail article.
There was.
What happened then?
Well, because we were so young, there wasn't really many newspapers around the school, especially the younger school, the lower school. And myself and a friend, in fact, that picked the paper up going, oh, what's this? What does this mean? That's us. It says haemophiliacs. So there was conversations taking place then. Is that us? Is that? But you weren't going to ask. Not at that age. Again, we were compliant. We were children. So you don't go to your doctors and say, are we going to get something? Is there anything wrong? You know, the normal childlike way you would put that. What's wrong, Dr. A? What's wrong? Or Dr. Wassett? So there was conversations and there was tangible fear, but it wasn't an overriding fear in the corridors. It was just conversations going, oh, we might be in some trouble here.
And then it was in the summer of 1983 that you began to feel unwell.
Yes.
What can you recall about that?
I had a jab, I think it was a jab the week before I went home. Got home. It's a beautiful summer. We, as a family, used to go to Worcester every year, but I couldn't go. All of my glands just went to the point of golf balls. My armpit glands were I couldn't close my arm. I went a bit yellow. I got ear infection that I couldn't shift. Mum didn't understand at all because it was something had really gone wrong. Temperatures spiked, night sweats, and so we had to sort of we nearly cancelled the trip to Worcester that year. But Mum kept taking me back to the GP. He didn't know. Probably glandular fever, Margaret. So that's what we believed it was. I spent most of that summer on the sofa in Portsmouth and in Worcester. Poorly.
And when you went back to school in September 1983, you were told, in fact, you found a note on your bed saying off to sick bay, and you were barrier nursed there for some 2 to 3 weeks.
That's right. And that's when I got hepatitis again. Yeah. In fact, that was odd, because they knew before I literally put my case down for the next term time, and I was asked to go to sick bay and 2 weeks in isolation with my fourth round of hepatitis.
Now, again, autumn 1983 by now, you had a friend, Richard,
Yes.
who'd become ill, pale, gaunt, lost a lot of weight, become rather withdrawn. It wasn't the norm for him, and it wasn't the normal illness that you were used to seeing in your schoolmates.
No. What we know about AIDS now, for example, what we know, back then we didn't, obviously, he looked terrible. He left, he came back, he looked fine before he left. He had a few temperatures and a few sore throats, teenage stuff, tonsillitis, we thought. He came back after half term, I believe, in October, and I looked at him and I thought, you're going to die. I knew he was going to die, and we were really tight. He wasn't at the school very long, but we bonded quick. He was a bit of a loner, but we bonded quick. So I saw him before he went to medical centre. I said, Richard, have a look at your eyes. Ooh, they're a bit dark. You know, the normal banter way that you talk as kids. And he said, oh, I'm in trouble. I'm in some trouble. I'm not very well. And he looked skeletal by that point. And, yeah, he died. He died. And we believe he was the first one to die of AIDS, and that was confirmed later on by a member of his family on Facebook that thanked me for what we're doing. Yeah.
He didn't come back after the October 1983 half-term, and his death was read out at an assembly later on.
That's right, and that was common practice at school.
You've also recalled in your witness statement the day in the summer of 1984 when you and a friend were at Dr. Arenstam's house with Dr. Arenstam and his wife.
Yes.
What can you recall about that?
I was struggling in our schoolwork, and our home life wasn't very good by that point, because obviously losing my father, teenage angst was coming. So we were struggling. So Dr. Arenstam thought it'd be a lovely idea to take us and I to his house for an afternoon to take us out to school, because we weren't really getting out of school, because we had quite a lot of problems with joints and bits, and we missed a few trips to Bewley, which is a normal school trip. We had a lovely afternoon. We met his son. He had 2 lovely Springer Spaniel dogs by his pool. His wife bought lemonade. It was lovely. I was like, oh, this is nice. I remember thinking, nice house, as you do. So towards the end of the day, I thought it would be helpful kids, and we picked up the tray, the lemonade tray, to take it back to a small kitchen annex that was on the back of his house. And we caught him. We caught him full of tears, welled up. He had big bags under his eyes anyway, and they were full. And he was pushing his hands on the sink like this, rocking. And we'd never seen that, just in pain, I think, emotionally in pain. He was more bullshit than me. He had no trouble asking direct questions in a direct way, even for a child. And he said, "What's wrong, Dr. A? What's wrong?" And he goes, again, "We've fucked up." It's a swearing thing, again, that came in. We've messed up, it's all gone wrong, words to that effect. And he was not inconsolable, because that would be an exaggeration. But he knew that he wasn't expecting us to go and be helpful. We weren't supposed to catch him. So asked, "Are we going to be okay, Doctor A? Are we all right? Are we okay?" The reaction was unique, a worry. And he said, "We'll do our best. We're going to do our absolute best for you." He never said we were going to be okay. So from that day forward, we knew something had gone quite wrong.
And you've said in your statement that it's around 1984 you believe Dr. Arenstam purchased heat-treated products early.
Yes.
And you've said this saved some lives.
Yeah, we believed it. I wrote that before Spaywood, so we don't know. That may not be relevant now.
What do you recall of May 1985 when you were told that you had been infected with HIV/AIDS? What can you recall about it?
The morning that we were told, the housemaster said, "You five in this house are going to go to the hemo centre at lunchtime." That was unusual, to five of us to go in one. Trelaws in our day, in that time, had an open door policy. So if you had an elbow bleed, say me and my friend, we would go in together, and Dr. Aaron Samuel Wassif would see you together, mainly Dr. Wassif. Yeah, so he was trying to keep that open door policy going, but we knew there was something wrong. Because there was, as I said earlier, there were things in corridors. Are we in trouble? We are in trouble. When? What is it? News was trickling through already about AIDS on the telly and blood. So that's a conversation we don't want to have with children. We all sat down, all five of us. Come on in, sat on the bench and stuff. They spoke to us. One of the opening lines was, "You may have heard the treatment that you've been given. The factor VIII isn't as clean as it should be." We went quiet. Yeah, we know. And they talked to us about CMV, parvovirus, which is something that dogs get, apparently. For about 15 minutes, they made it as comfortable as they could for 15 minutes. And it took them quite a while to get to the point, especially because we had to be back to school for 10 to 2, that sort of get on with it moment. And then Dr. Aaron Sam just came straight out with it and said, you've been given HIV. Some of you here have been given HIV, you have it. And he lifted his left hand and said, you have, you haven't, you have, you haven't, you have.
And the fifth "you have" was you.
Yeah. I was the last by the door of the office.
And at the meeting you're describing with the 4 other boys and you, Dr. Arenstam was there, Dr. Wassef was there.
Yes.
You've recalled the head of physiotherapy being there and 2 of the haemophilia nurses.
Yes, it was a bit of a tight squeeze because it was a very small office, so it was tight.
And one of the boys, I won't ask you to name names, but one of the boys asked, "How long have we got?"
Yes.
And you asked the same question. And what was the response that you received?
At that point, the prognosis, especially with what was happening over in the US, was 2 to 3 years on an average. So he answered it honestly and said, at the moment it's 2 to 3 years, but we believe it's going to be longer. But you hear the 2 to 3 years and that's it. That's what you're locked into, because that is what was happening to other haemophiliacs across the pond in America, and likewise here. Yeah.
And you were then given an explanation about T cells. And you've said they wanted you to try and understand the science somehow.
We became mini scientists. Within, I say, a year of that, we were actually drawing B and T cells as part of the treatment program. Being shown how to put condoms on bananas. We literally had this year of science, of logic. It was all about the T cell and the B cell. That's all that mattered. In fact, so much so, a nurse recollected to me fairly recently there that we'd forgotten about haemophilia. All we were treating was AIDS, some hepatitis, AIDS, haemophilia, to the point where they sort of forgotten how painful haemophilia could be, because all they were treating was AIDS.
What were you told at that meeting about telling other people, about sharing information about your diagnosis?
Just that they would do the best, because obviously with the school, with Trelaws being the way it was, there was already a profile for media. So we were told not to tell anyone within the school, especially at the school gate, because the Daily Mail and other papers were sometimes down the gate going, have you got haemophilia? Have you got AIDS? And that was awkward as a 13, 14-year-old. Within the school, it was it's quite a difficult time. Because initially the staff wanted to know what was going on. Of course they did. How was it transmitted? There was one problem over tears. And saliva. They were worried about tears and saliva. It had not been decided if it could be transmitted through that. So there are many memories to find there in that period. Initially, we had disposable bed linen and just for 3 or 4 months while they were trying to get themselves together. There'd be a yellow biohazard bag in the corner of your dorm, and you'd try to throw your bedding away. You have to learn to do your own washing suddenly when you'd never washed a pair of socks in your life. The staff were as supportive as they could be. 85% of the staff were extremely supportive. 15%, this was where I might get a bit angry. 15% of those staff made my life and other boys' lives hell. They were obsessed. Obsessed is not an exaggeration. Have you got it? Have you got this? Is a couple of teachers and one careers advisor in particular. I was having careers advice every 3 months. I don't need to see you again. You're only going to ask me have I got HIV, and you know you're not allowed to ask me because Dr. Arenstam and Wasif had said, if you ever get asked, you immediately come to us and we'll deal with it from the centre end. So that was very difficult. There was a school rule called the 6-inch rule, where could you imagine being because when you're a bonding kids, there's a 6-inch rule always in place. Apparently, it was a school rule that had always been a part of the school rules. We didn't know that. It hadn't. No. And it had been implemented implicitly by 1985-86.
And what was this 6-inch rule?
You were not allowed within 6 inches of the person sitting next to you, regardless, male or female. They would come up. There was 2 teachers that had the measuring tapes around their necks in their pockets and would come up and measure you. 6-inch rule. 6-inch rule. Now, that was supposed to only be in term time, in school time, in the school day up till 4 o'clock in private school days, in children days. This continued at times up until 10 o'clock. I mean, I just got to have a moment then. We felt diseased. That made us feel diseased, isolated. And we got to a point where I didn't go and tell Dr. Arenstam or Wasif anymore because it was a problem. We were a problem. We were walking disease.
Just taking you back for a moment to that day in May 1985 when you were told you had HIV.
Yeah.
How old were you?
15.
And you've described in your statement a memory of an image of walking out into the sunshine. And
Yes.
how did you feel?
Because being from the coast and Portsmouth area, I used to love the sunshine. I still do now. It was the how many more sunrises will I see when the sun came through the blind. I went. It wasn't a selfish thing. It was how many more sunrises will I see. But it wasn't just an I thing. It was an us thing. It was a bonded thing. We were children, and we were bonded, and we were going to die. And how many more of those? Because it was a beautiful day. And the day was just, it was cold. So it was a warm day. And how cold I went inside. We're dead. We're dead.
Of those 4 other boys, again mentioning no names,
Yeah.
but of those 4 other boys who were with you in that room, how many survived today?
None.
Just you?
I'm the last remaining survivor today.
You fell out with your mother not long after this because of the HIV or the way in which the information had or hadn't been provided. What can you
This is.
tell us about that?
This is. I would try and speak of it logically as I can, because obviously being at college and then at home for 3 months in holidays. She didn't understand it. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to know about it. I was a liar. Doctors do not hurt you. Doctors don't maim. She used the word maim, which for my mum was quite an interesting word. Doctors do good by you. They don't hurt you. That's all I heard. So I said, but Mum, we've been told. We've got it. No, you haven't. It was denial. She also then proceeded to tell the entire street, though, even though she denied the obvious, that her son had HIV. She told everybody in my home street, which started off a rampage, is not an exaggeration, of every time I left the house. We were lucky we didn't have the house or door spray painted or any of that. But it started off a sort of cascade of comments like, here comes Live AIDS, after the famous 80s charity concert. Don't come to AIDS, because he's got AIDS. Or GAY, got AIDS yet. And that was pretty much my upbringing from that point on that street in Portsmouth. And Mum wasn't having any of it. She just sat back and she didn't protect me at all. At all.
And you've said you were isolated and alone.
Yep.
Your mum wasn't supportive, as if you explained. Your dad had died back in 1980.
Yes.
You could no longer go out in the surrounding areas of Portsmouth.
No.
And ultimately, your relationship with your mother and your living there broke down.
Completely.
Did you go back into care for a time?
Yes, I was then placed into Kerr House in Cosham, which is ironically where I started. So
As a baby?
yeah, I ended up being there because if they weren't going to believe me, and I did try my best to say, I bought her presents and bought her gifts and she would not believe me, but there was also one day that, I don't know if this is in my statement, I think I have given it to you since though, that where she actually came to see me in a school choir production at Christmas time. And unusually she actually came to the Hemo Centre and she asked Dr. Wassif, is everything okay with Adrian's treatment in her normal, she had an attitude on her. And he put his hands together, Mrs. Goodyear, don't worry about a thing. Everything is fine, Mrs. Goodyear. And I'll never forget that. So the problem then for me was proving this. We knew we had this thing, but she wasn't going to believe it.
You spent about 10 months in care,
Yep.
and then you had two surrogate guardians, two members
did.
of staff at Trelaws, who took you in and decided
did.
to look after you.
They were, they were amazing to me, yeah. They changed my life.
You've described the 6-inch rule. There were other ways you've related in your written materials about how the fear of infection was addressed, and you have a particular memory about a school drama production of My Fair Lady.
Oh, you got that? The chocolate. Yeah, Henry Higgins. I was playing Higgins, and in one scene he bites a chocolate in half and pops it in Eliza's mouth, like very strongly. And there was a problem with that. I couldn't bite into the chocolate in case I infected Claire, potentially, who was my friend at the time. It took them a week to get a clearance on what to do about Chocolate Gate of My Fair Lady. So it was decided very simply, as the director, a wonderful teacher, the director, she suggested, the week before this was a problem anyway, to just handle the box. But this actually had to go to clearance via the Haemophilia Centre and back again about a chocolate in a box. So I think that shows you how specific the detail and the fear was that surrounded HIV, because of the falling tombstones and things on the TV, and management and laundry.
How physically did the HIV virus begin to affect you and your health?
This is the point where I'm going to use the word lucky, or right enough to know about cellular cell reproduction. I was obsessed with oranges. For some reason I got sick, I had oranges. Always did. And I got to the point where I was having 40, this is relevant, you'll see my point in a minute. I used to have 14 oranges a day. I was obsessed with them. Vitamin C, vitamin C, vitamin C. My cell count thankfully stayed higher for much longer than the other lads. And that created quite a lifeboat syndrome, last man in the lifeboat. I said to Dr. Wassif, I asked him, why is my cell count still 600, or 450 it was then, that period? And my friend over here, he's got 9, and he's got full-blown AIDS. We don't know. Is it anything to do with vitamin C and the amounts that I take? He denied it flat. He went, vitamin C has got nothing to do. So I'm not saying it doesn't cure HIV, no. But surely, why is my cell count one of the highest now as an outpatient as I was then? But he poo-pooed that. But eventually, before my brother got sick, my cell count it depleted quickly within guessing a year and a half, and I was down to 37 T cells. So it's definitely time for treatment.
You've described your remaining years at Trelawn's from really that point onwards as in the following terms in your statement. You said nurses struggled with how to tell parents who didn't know how to cope, as falling tombstones around 1987 were telling us not to die of ignorance, while our mortalities were played out in state-funded commercials regarding AIDS, as family after family across the country became terrified of how this virus could be transmitted. It was locked down on every emotional, physical and psychological level in every kind of relationship, and we were just kids. We still had to finish our studies, which was for many an arduous or near impossible task.
Yes. I suffered terribly in school. The one thing to refer back to when we were told, I was in science at 10 to 2 the day that I was told I was HIV positive. That's something to this day, I didn't even get the afternoon off. So that does go against the Trelaw ideal of care and compassion. What were we going to learn after that? What was the point in studies? I did get GCSEs and so on, but what was the point in studies? You're going to die in 2 to 3 years. So, teenage, of course. Teenage world is different to adult, of course. But it became, what's the point? What's the point?
You had a number of people you knew in the early 1990s who died.
Terrible.
And you've related in your witness statement reference to a friend, Chris, who died in 1991. And I think you wanted to say something about Chris and conversations you'd had with him.
This is quite a key memory about the risk to haemophiliacs in that 83, 84, 234 period of where the factor wasn't heat treated. Chris had a type of haemophilia that was von Willebrand, and he had nosebleeds. He didn't need factor. It was DDVAP or vitamin K, other clotting agents. This was just another one of his noses. Myself and a friend, Si, were just hanging around the transfusion room while Chris was bleeding out. And one of the nurses went to get some factor, and we noticed straight away it was American. Simon said, "What are you giving him that for? It's got AIDS in it," directly to the nurses. And because Simon was quite bolshy, and again, more confident than me, I sort of just go, and what it was really strange. But what else the nurse responded was, "Oh, don't be silly. What else can we give him? What else can we give him?" And we were desperately worried about him then. He didn't need factor, not really. And then I said something along the lines of, "There's British in the fridge, isn't there? Why not give him British?" And then we were asked to leave the transfusion room. And he only ever had 3 shots of factor A in his life. And he was one of the first of apart from Richard, the next member of my group to die. And Richard was my dorm mate for 2 years. So was another chap. And Chris was a dorm mate of mine for another 2 years. It was such a waste of life because he never needed factor VIII. Well, he needed factor VIII, but he certainly didn't need American factor VIII, no.
You, at some stage, then learnt that in addition to HIV, you had been infected with hepatitis C.
Yes.
What can you recall about that?
Around approximately 1990, a very brief conversation with Dr. Wasif. You've got hepatitis C. Okay, but you know what it is. It's called non-A, non-B. We just called it C. We've got the test. Don't drink too much, but it won't be again. There was a cover-up approach. Don't worry about it. It's just yellow, and that's a very good point. Prior to that, I saw a friend of mine in the transfusion room who was just yellow again, about 3 or 4 years before that. And we were so used to people being yellow, it didn't kill you. Hepatitis didn't become a problem to us at that point. It was so undersold as a problem. And 3 months later, that person died. And even then, I didn't register that hepatitis was a killer problem. It's something you got better from. Yeah.
You've said in your statement you thought it was September 1991 when you were told that
That's
you
right.
had, in a regular appointment, you were told that
Yeah.
you had hepatitis C, and you were led to understand that there'd been some awareness of you having NA/NB hepatitis.
Yes, that's right.
For some time before that.
It had been discussed from as young as I can remember. I think from, Dr. Wasif, he said that's the good thing about Dr. Wasif. He'd actually allow you to stand or go to your own test notes and show you the red ones, the ones that were up or down, And from quite a young age, he did that. So it was another case. Master, he called everyone by Master, so Master Goodyear or Master Smith, and invited me over to look at my notes. He went, this one here. But we told you about NAMB. NAMB? What's that? Or non-A, non-B hepatitis. Like, yeah, you got it there. You've now got hepatitis C, and it won't affect you at all. Don't worry about it. So we didn't worry about it. That was it. It was a very simple, brief conversation.
So I note the time. I've got a number of questions still for Aid, and I wondered whether this would be a convenient moment for you, sir, to break for lunch and
Yes,
resume Aid's evidence afterwards.
Certainly, but you don't mind having a break over lunch, I hope, Aid?
No. Appreciate that.
And when we do, as I've said before here, I don't know if you were here to hear it or not, but over lunch, don't discuss your evidence with anyone. It's your evidence, not what people may be telling you to say, or however innocently that may arise.
Naturally.
So it's just yours. So don't discuss that. Whatever else you want to talk about, that's fine.
Not a worry. As
I hope you enjoy your lunch. But we'll come back. Would it be all right to start at 2:15? So 2:15, we'll begin again.
Thank you, sir. Aidan, I'm going to ask you in a moment about the treatment you've received for your conditions and the impact that the conditions in your treatment have had on you. But just before we leave the subject of Trelawney's, there's something which you have a memory of, a conversation, I understand, which isn't in your statement, but which you've wanted to mention, about vans which used to take children from Trelawney's to Oxford Haemophilia Centre.
Yes, quite commonly, prior to me being there, I got one memory of a van in 1981. It became commonplace to take children to Oxford. That as far as the children could ascertain, nobody knew why they were being taken to Oxford. But they would go to Oxford, receive factor, and then come back to Trelawney. And in that period, as far as we can ascertain, Dr. Arenstam would rarely, sometimes stay overnight in the hospital campus and come back with the children. That said, for balance, Oxford had a well-known orthopaedic department. So that's to balance that up. But they didn't know why they were going to Oxford. additionally, if you'd had concentrate, you didn't go to the overnight trip van to Oxford.
And there was a conversation when someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Don't get in the van," or something like
Clearly,
that.
I remember, and I know I know exactly where I was standing because I was looking at the hemo centre, and a friend of mine, you don't want to get on that van. You don't want to get on that jokey way, much older lad, about 16 he was at the time. And I said, why? He said, that's a child catcher van. Yeah, that's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That's its nickname, because I was about 11. So, of course, that stuck, and lots of people, I would say at least 5 or 6, which is quite a lot for the Trelaw people who remain today, have memories of that van and going to Oxford to be transfused.
At the time you signed your statement, you said that there were 73 children from Trelaws known to have died from infections, with only 16 left.
16, yes, that's so.
Can I then turn to ask you about the treatment you've received for your infections? As well as the HIV and hepatitis C infections, you've also been told you're at risk of VCJD.
Yes,
And that's impacted upon the way in which you receive care when you've had to go into hospital for surgical procedures.
yes, it has. Both my ankles. In fact, when I went in to get my left ankle fused in 2012, the surgeon at the time couldn't quite believe the conversation, said, I'm going to have to be on the end of the day list. And he didn't understand. It was like I was speaking Swahili. He went, but anyone could have a risk of CJD. Anyone that had a beeper. The obvious lines. And he couldn't understand why that was the case. But the protocol was followed. And likewise, 5 years later, when they fixed this ankle, the same protocol again at the end of the day.
You recall a conversation in September 1986 in Basingstoke Hospital when a haematologist said something to you which has stuck with you. What was that?
This is probably the only point where my anger would have to be controlled. We were sent over by Dr. Arenstam and or Wasith, or both, to go and get another opinion. It was a virologist stroke haematologist. I can't remember her name, and I wish I could. To get some support outside of the college, a second opinion, what the treatment, if there was any treatment protocols, AZT I think was just coming in, being talked about then. And we decided that we didn't have to go, but we agreed it would be maybe a good idea to go and see this haematologist in Basingstoke. It started off very well. She saw us all individually. We got a taxi was paid for us to go to Basingstoke and return us to Trelaw. Sat down. She said, "This is the T cell. Also, you're quite educated already about the T cells and the B cells and white blood cell counts and what they should be from the Trelaw training through Wasif when he used to show you your bleeds and your blood tests." 5 minutes was fine, and I thought we were getting somewhere. And she said there will be treatment. They're spending millions on treatment and all these other things. And it was a Jekyll and Hyde moment. That is the only way to describe it. Where it was a point. But, so she finished her spiel for the consultation. But do you know how lucky you are to have free treatment for your haemophilia? Direct eye contact. And it was one of those moments you just look behind you and you think, oh, okay, there's somebody else walked into the room that hadn't. And she just proceeded to run it down. That we were the problem. I was the problem. And that's really my only memory of that whole line, apart from going outside. And I went outside and I stood in the disabled parking space, they were yellow back then, in front of Basingstoke Hospital. And that was the moment. It wasn't when I was told that I was positive. That was a huge problem and a response on the day. But then you got on with your life. Because there was an emphasis at Trelaw on keeping that T-cell count up, as I said. That was a day that I felt like a walking disease. That was a day when we were too young to notice the broken bottles on the beach. I said that in my statement. And that's what I felt. I felt like a broken bottle on the beach, and we are a walking, talking biohazard. We are at risk of infection as walking. And after that, there's something I didn't go into my statement, but I'll provide you with it. I became scared of my own blood. I used to bite my nails back then. So when I bite my nails and I bite the quick, can I reinfect myself? I can reinfect others. And it just became this cacophony of negative. And at that point I thought, well, it was a turning point though. So whatever time I've got, I will make it count. I'll make it count in some way. But I've never forgiven that moment in my life. Because I say, it wasn't just me as an individual, it was the two other guys with me that she had the same conversation with. We then, of course, on our return from Basingstoke, we went to have a chat with Dr. Wassif. In fact, the other lad that I was with was bulged and straight in. He went, what the have you just sent us to that lady for? You have no idea the way that she's just spoken to us. And he wanted Dr. Wassif to do something about it. Dr. Wassif brushed it aside as if we were idiots at that point. That's the only way that I can describe it. I'm sure that you've got it wrong. You've got it wrong. Said that person, that doctor, would never speak to you in that way. And she did. And from that moment forward, that's genuinely, I felt infectious and I felt infected.
You refused to interfere on treatment for your hepatitis C. You knew it would have, or understood it would have, a poor prospect of success given your genotype. Eventually, after many years, you received treatment for your hepatitis C in about 2015?
Yes, I held out.
That cleared the virus. Did you experience side effects of that treatment?
Yes, there was a very strange one, which I'll say. I had a kind of a green tinge to my skin about 6 weeks in. The ribavirin wasn't too pleasant. It was, itchy, the sort of runs of things you get with the treatments. My viral load was extremely high, but I still held out because I'd seen what interferon had done to other people, and I was not brave enough, if you like, to go near that, because psychologically I don't think I would have coped. Headaches, itchy, sleep, forget that. Memory loss in the middle, and halfway through, and it was only 3 months, I couldn't remember how to get to places if I got into my car. Locally, I thought, where's Sainsbury's? It's 65. So small things like that. But I got through it, got through that, and gratefully, pleased to say that I'm undetectable.
Do you receive follow-up care in relation to your liver? I
receive full blood counts every 6 months, and the usual under the HIV regime too. So my specialist there, they both take 2 lots of full blood counts with me every 6 months. But that's it really. I've recently had an ultrasound scan because I had some right upper quadrant pain, which I've always suffered from. That's another thing about hepatitis C. The amount of times I said that I was told, if that pain is in your head, will you get better? If we cure this, will that get better? So I've lost my thread, sorry.
I was simply asking about the follow-up care in relation, having cleared the virus for the hepatitis C as a result of the treatment, what further follow-up you were having, and you've had an ultrasound scan.
That's right, for the pain, and it was clear.
You've undergone a whole host of treatments in relation to your HIV. You detailed in your statement 5 treatments from 1998 onwards.
That's right, about that, because my cell count I held out as long as I could.
Because for one of the treatments you couldn't get funding for that locally, and you had to transfer your care to St Thomas's.
That's right. Dr. Wassif informed me that there's a medication. The friend that helped me when I was in care, the true lady that helped me a lot, she read all the Lancets, and she was a social worker in Tower Hamlets anyway, and so she was clued up, and she said that there's one medication, because my platelet count was 9. I was in some trouble with my platelet count because of HIV. Said there's this one drug you have to get. It's called Seguinavir. It's not very pleasant to take, but you need to be on that drug. Your cell count should, and your platelet count will rise. She did a lot of research for me. So I went back to Dr. Wassif and asked him, can I get Seguinavir? Because apparently the double combination of 3TC at the time, I think it was, isn't as good without Seguinavir in it. And he said, no, we can't have it. I went, we can't get funding for that. They're not going to pay for that. And so I just went to St Thomas's. I said, you know what's going to have to happen here. Then I'm going to have to go to St Thomas's because I've been in touch with them and they will be able to provide it for me. So I spent 10 months being cared for or looked after by St Thomas's. Yeah, and it did get the seguinavir drug, which did in turn raise my C-cell count up by about 80, and my platelet count recovered to above 100 mark, which was really helpful.
And you continue, obviously, to take medication for your HIV, but one of the consequences of the HIV treatment you've had is that you're left with a debilitating pain in nerve endings.
Yes, it's and the word, when people use the word debilitating, it's incredibly painful, especially on the feet and the hands. In fact, doing that now. That's what I was worried about when I was giving my evidence. That was throwing me off, so I'm ignoring it in the feet today. But yes, they've just changed one of the drugs called Descovy, that they think that might help it. If not in a year's time, it looks like it might be permanent. And it doesn't matter how many rests you have and how many times you sit down. So you can sit down for half an hour. You stand up and it's the same pain. So it's not a sitting down and resting kind of pain, and that's deeply concerning to me because that means that will maybe end up disabling me in the sense of what I can do in the world and life.
In terms of the emotional, psychological impact of your infections and treatments, you've described in your statement problems with concentration, the brain fog that others have spoken of. You also had a particularly difficult period, the late 1990s through to 2001, where you were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Bipolar
syndrome. I felt guilty for being alive. Felt terrible for being alive.
And in terms of the survivor's guilt, you've noted in your statement that you had 3 biological half-brothers.
Yes.
One died as a baby.
Cool.
Your other 2 brothers both suffer from haemophilia, severe haemophilia A, like you.
Yes.
And they were both infected through blood products.
Same way, yes.
One died of HIV/AIDS in 1997.
Yes.
And your other brother died in 2015 from a hepatitis C-related brain hemorrhage.
He did, yes. Just before Christmas.
And again, you say in your statement that you constantly worry about whether your hepatitis C may come back, and you're constantly afraid.
Consistently. I mean, sometimes it could be every day, twice a day. What happens is, it seems so, would I be here at 4 o'clock? And that's come from losing some other guys too when we were in our youth and things. But that's kind of got worse since Gary died. He got off the bus, he got into his flat, and was dead before he hit the floor. And he'd just completed his treatment. So now that has only enhanced that fear that you get this far, you've taken all your medications, you've been compliant again, as well as a child and as well as an adult, and you die. And I know that's the same for every human being, but it's exasperated by the issue of what happened to Gary.
Have you been offered or ever received any counselling or psychological support?
Yes. Prior 2015, you have to check the date line, it was when it sort of started. I wanted some, I needed some, because I was waking up thinking you're going to die anyway. I was going down that road. But it wasn't a depression road. I could actually be happy quite quickly, go, oh, snap out of it and pick myself up. What it was just this nagging feeling, so I went to get some help. And the Basingstoke unit, haemophilia unit, had got their 2 new counsellors together. And I didn't know how much to trust in the process. But for me personally, I benefited from it greatly. I mean, it was so helpful.
But that's 30 years after you were told you had HIV,
yes.
That you accessed that.
There was a small amount of counselling in 1988 that was held at the Haemophilia Centre where everyone was sick and where everyone was the last places we saw all our Trelaw brothers. And counselling was never going to work there, was it? In the place where you were told you were infected and you could die. So that's that didn't work. So it was a very small window in 1988 of counselling.
And the counselling you received in 2015, which you found beneficial, lasted for how long?
2 years, 18 months? Yeah. And it was very beneficial because she was a great, the way she put things, simple paragraphs, she helped me refile and actually sitting there talking to you, I'm using the techniques as I'm talking to you.
May I ask you about your working life, because you have a passion for music.
Yes.
And you worked for a number of years in various roles relating to the music industry.
Yeah, all sorts. Yeah, a tool education was very expensive, so I wasn't going to waste it. Got some breaks, started helping them with equipment, and lucky enough I did a 4-year music course at the school. I didn't get great grades, but I passed, so I knew how to do a sound check. So I just jumped in and I hoped in it, and I got hired long-term by a production company. One in particular worked for one band. They were quite a well-known band, and they took me around and I became their tour manager, and it was great. And I did say totally 4 years with them, working all the time. And my skills were noted, my production skills were noted, and I got asked to go on a world tour, but I guess that's your next question.
There was a reason you couldn't go on that tour.
Yeah, HIV solely and only. I'd proven to myself and to the haemophilia doctors that, number one, I could maintain my haemophilia. I only have had, in all those early gigs, I only have had one right elbow bleed in the entire time of working, which I thought was because I was fit and active. And these guys noticed, there's 2 guys up in Leeds, they noticed my work, they loved the way the thing looked, said, we don't actually want you to move any equipment, we just want your brain and your design, and we want to see what you can do on this rig. And I was over the moon, so I came back on the Monday, went straight to the haemophilia centre, asked my doctor, I've been offered a world tour with Peter Gabriel for 9 months. Isn't it great? And he said, oh, you won't be able to do that. Not even responding to like the excitement of maybe achieving a dream job, a dream tour. I mean, my dream was always just to do 1 gig at Wembley. Then I'm done, and I did that quite a few times by then. And see, that still hurts now. Because I wanted a job. I knew that I could have done the job, but the reason why was because of HIV and insurance. I could not get the insurance to go into other countries. America, Far East, Australia may have been problematic back then. And I said, I just spent 6 or 7 years trying to get. I've had a true education. I've had the best treatment up for, ish, for my haemophilia, and then suddenly you get it all taken away. Everything you want, and your dreams of a child and youth are taken. So I phoned up the Haemophilia Society as well, not quite believing that news, and they reiterated to me that I wasn't going to go on Peter's tour. And I again went back to Dr. Wasif, and he phoned the Haemophilia Society, so 3 times. So I had to lie my way out of that. I had to phone the 2 guys up in Leeds that run this special effects production company and say, I'm so sorry, I've been booked for another tour. So I didn't completely shoot myself in the foot, but I couldn't tell them the reason.
And more recently, again, because of your infections and the physical and mental impact of them, you've not been able to work.
No. I still dream of doing one more tour.
You've some experience of the trusts and schemes.
Yes.
In particular, the McFarlane Trust.
Yes.
And you received some payments for them, some regular payments, but then you went through a period of time where every application you made for a one-off payment was rejected.
Yes, Jenny, they were so good at first. They were very, very good in the first few years, and then I don't know, something went wrong about 10 years ago where when the ankle, I just needed a new mattress, memory foam thing, which is exactly what the scheme is for. No, I needed a decorating grant. I still need a decorating grant today, actually. Something done today. No, I can't have to. So you know what I'm trying to say. You write and you ask for what you need, and that is not there. So I've given up even asking. I'm not going to bother writing to the schemes to beg, as other people have said here. I'm not going to beg for £700 here or £1,000 towards a decorating grant. No.
And you've not been able to get a mortgage or
No.
life insurance.
No.
You live in rented accommodation.
Yes.
And you have a concern about the long-term security of that, particularly if anything happens to you.
That's right, yeah. Because obviously then when you go, you go. It's not a secure tenancy. So you put the key in thinking, how long is that key going to turn for? I don't mean physical life, as in life while you're here. And when you're stuck in that trap, you're stuck in a benefit trap. You cannot step out of that. There's no financial way of relieving those issues. And so I've been there for 19 years. And I was told the house was just a stepping stone. It's a tiny little box house, it's tiny. And you won't be long, it's just a stepping stone. It wasn't, it's a noose. It's now a noose, I think. Then again, pragmatic, lots of people don't have a roof. So we've really got to put that into it. But psychologically, it's not very healthy. Not very healthy at all.
Ada, I just wanted to read out something that you've sent to me and ask you whether there is anything you want to add to that. You've talked about the life you could have had and said this: we will never truly be able to experience what it's like to recover and move on. So many of our hopes, lives and dreams were removed from us for the remainder of our lives. And then you've quoted a friend of yours from Trelawn's, Joseph,
Yes.
who said this: a powerful word is potential. The DOH, NHS and certain individuals took away our potential. It's exactly what they did. They took away the potential for a family life, being a supportive partner and supporting the family home, to hold down that career that could have provided for everybody. The potential to be happy, to be an adventurer, an explorer, an office worker, a computer programmer, a lighting designer. That list, you've then said, is a continual, never-ending one.
Yes.
Does that sum up, in Joseph's words, how you
It resonated perfect. That's why I noted it down, because it stuck with me, and that's why I wrote it straight down. Yeah. He locked into... He articulated better than I, at that point, what I wanted to say, and I'm so glad that he did. We had that conversation last year. Yes, because it is. And the begging for every last pound, when this is not our fault. It's not our fault. You know, we should be helped financially, generously, because we would have been proper taxpayers. We didn't go, say, to Trelawn's to do nothing. So, as I said earlier, it was an expensive education. We went to be something because we were told we could be something, and that was taken away several times.
Hey, those are the questions I have for you, but I think there's something else you wanted to add.
It's just a little few words. When I first arrived at the Lord Mayor Trelaw College in 1980 at age just 9.5, the half was always important. I did so along with 10 or so new pupils with haemophilia who started in the same year and were of a similar age. Boarding school life, especially so young, was a dive in the deep end experience. You had to adapt speedily, but we were young, and after the first year we settled into school life and all that entails. And all of our many bleeds were expertly cared for as well. No more missing long periods of school due to hospitals. That was a transformation for its time. We also bonded quickly throughout our time there, and those friendships remained after leaving school too. Those bonds were and remain life-defining, immeasurable in a way that's quite difficult to encapsulate here. Also, as I just said, a Trelaw education became the making of many of us, and I'll always be grateful for it. Along with my classmates, I even attained some GCSEs, which would have been problematic due to the lack of education on offer in Portsmouth in those younger days. Equally, set against the backdrop of having severe haemophilia. Trelawn's was a private school deeply entrenched in all the traditions of such an establishment, regardless of it being aimed at youngsters who happen to have some physically limiting issues like ours. It had its name steeped in history, and as pupils, we sort of felt special because in many ways we were made to feel special just by attending. Even the name Lord Mayor Trelaw had a prestigious title from the off, and likewise a solid reputation that remains, with annual visits from every Lord Mayor of London who held the post visiting back then. This 100-year tradition still continues to this day. You see, the word Lord resonates with youngsters for many reasons, especially when the school bell goes and you're singing the school hymn Jerusalem. In assemblies just before registration, or in the case of us haemophilia students back then, when you had to skip assembly so you could attend the haemophilia centre to see the doctor for your factor, your prophylaxis, or likewise. That part. Many Trelaw memories are happy ones, thankfully, but others are extremely sad, and some of the images and feelings that we've seen can never be unseen. We wish they could be, because I can only liken them to a war-torn scenario. They are so extreme due to the things seen and experienced that no young person should ever see. All because you were born with a genetic blood disorder called haemophilia. And the disorder and the onslaught that HIV, AIDS and hepatitis have ravaged in their wake, it was and it has been relentless. We were treated to live, but then in turn to die, one by one, or to otherwise trade a healthier, happier or working life for a far gravely sicker one, due to our repeatedly and multiply infected factor concentrate treatments. We're still in the dark of how that treatment went so disastrously wrong for so many and for so long. We can't light or change that dark, or the experience or hurt suffered. We can't bring back our loved ones, but that said, I'd switch places with any one of them tomorrow if it meant they would have a chance to live their life over, but in a healthier way, in a today way, with the advances in treatment. Additionally, there have been many questions from the Trelaw haemophilia community and their families throughout the years. Some are recurrent and prudent, so they should be asked within this inquiry on behalf of the community for some hopeful peace of mind. That just refers to PUPs, as we mentioned earlier, where the Spaywood trial, what made Dr. Alan put 50 of us on American plasma, knowing how he felt. He knew the dangers. Who was above him? Who made that man push us HIV for our veins knowingly? There was no reason for him to do that. Whose directives was he following at the time? Because it guaranteed us HIV. As he said, he could have avoided HIV, but it guaranteed that we would get it for 8 months. I'll get in on that part. Oh, sorry. Whomever engages with the next phase of the inquiry next year will hopefully be able to provide so much needed light and clarity for us all after this time, which has been 35 plus years too long, with future candour being so important to find out why, finally. That is something we've been soul-searching for and actively campaigning for alongside many wonderful people passing on that road as we carry them. Their legacies and braveries remain with us. Thank you. You will never be forgotten. For both my late, wonderful, wild, kind, strong and funny brothers Gary and Jason, and the 73 Trelaw lads who've now passed due to either HIV or hepatitis, and all those around the country still living with the consequences of this treatment disaster. For the voices who fell silent, who lived a secret life and were forced to die a secret death, And for all the families who suffered that silence and still do today, we're here today for you. No one is left behind. And again, no one, not anyone, is ever truly forgotten. And lastly, and for our Trelaw kin, past and present, we have lived long enough to keep our promises. Some of us, 16 of us. These promises we all made together from those unbroken bonds that will always tie us for life, that were made in our life-defining youth, that in that we would find our truth, and now and hope and pray that we will. Thank you for this opportunity, Sir Brian, and Council, Jenny, likewise, for inviting me to give my evidence and for listening. I very much appreciate it, as do our many brave and wonderful friends still living, and for those who are so tragically not. Thank you again.
Thank you, Aidan. I'm just going to ask Mr. Cummins, who, as you know, represents you, if there's anything terrible. So, just give me one moment, please, Aidan. Just one question further that Mr. Cummins suggests that I ask you, and that's about the waiver that you signed as part of the 1991 litigation.
Yes.
You've said in your statement that you initially refused to sign anything, but then what you've described as a good cop, bad cop routine took place, which, as I understand it, you had to sign because you were told, or you felt you had to, because no one would get anything.
Absolutely. We waited. Myself and a friend that I was with at the time, we said that no, there's something wrong here, because we already had the first 20,000, the hardship payment, which confused everybody. So the waiver payment, what was this? What we're signing? We waited till the last week.
And at the point in time at which you signed that,
Yes.
you did not know that you had hepatitis C.
No.
It was about 3 months after that that
It was
you
3 months afterward.
You learnt your diagnosis.
Yes, it was, and we were forced. If you don't sign this, your friends, and we didn't know what post-traumatic stress disorder was then.
Okay.
We lost 5 that Christmas before, so we signed it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Aid, for coming to give your evidence.
Appreciate that. Thank you.